Hello, Crimestituents. It's great to chat with you again. Before we jump in, Sarah, have you seen Longlegs yet?
No, I haven't, but I want to.
I want to too. I might go tonight. I might go like in a week or two, but the promo for it has been amazing.
Yeah. No, the promo has been really good. Your sister saw it.
She did, and she said that she threw up in the theater.
Which makes me want to watch it more, I think.
I know, unfortunately it does.
Yeah.
So I've actually never seen a horror movie in theaters before. I'm like kind of excited to have that. I mean, I saw A Quiet Place.
Okay, yeah.
But that hardly counts as a horror movie.
I've definitely seen, I'm totally blanking on what movies I've seen in theater. I definitely have seen a horror movie in theater, I think.
I found this random Nicolas Cage film a while back. I'll look for the name for it, but it's like, it was just a random film. And he played this character that was supposed to be really unlikable and kind of unsettling.
Okay.
And he wasn't a murderer or anything, but he made me feel just so physically uncomfortable watching this character. Like, it was so unsettlingly cringy. And this was a, like, professor, if I'm remembering correctly. And so I'm really excited to see what Nicolas Cage does with a serial killer figure, because he had me looking the other way in, like, a classroom type setting. So what is he going to do with a serial killer?
No, see, I also love movies that make me feel actively uncomfortable and frightened too. I really enjoy that feeling. Not in real life, but like when it's manufactured. You know what I watched last night?
What?
Zone of Interest. Have you watched this yet?
I haven't seen it, no.
You should watch it. It is very unsettling. Very unsettling. Okay. You know what it's about. Yeah. Really good though. Everyone should definitely watch it. But in the same way of feeling like very uncomfortable and like uneasy the whole time, they definitely achieve in making that happen. And I'm going to be on a plane this afternoon. I think I'm going to read some analysis on it.
One of the things I've heard about the Longlegs film is that everything about it is unsettling. Like the colors, the lighting, the cinematography, the music. And that's more of my style of movie. I don't really like blood and gore. Okay. Some of it's fine, but I don't really enjoy just watching like blood for the sake of blood. Yeah. But when it's like that unsettling feeling, it's almost like your stomach's dropping. That's what I like.
Yeah, I like those too. I like those too. So we'll have to come back with our full review.
Yes, absolutely. I'll definitely will have seen it by the time we record again. Yeah. So
I don't know if you've heard of this movie called The House That Jack Built. I haven't seen it yet.
Yes, I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it yet. So maybe we shouldn't be talking about it. But I think it might be on the same vein. That's one of my other movies that I need to watch.
All right, so I have 3 films on my to-be-watched list.
Yes.
All right.
1,000%.
Cool. Well, moving on. I'm coming off the heels of writing a rather involved 2-part series on the murder of Philip Barton Key II by Congressman Daniel Sickles, which was heavy on history and precedent and scandal. It's a super interesting case, and I definitely recommend listening if you haven't already. And since we're still knee-deep in a series on the Watergate scandal, also great episodes to go listen to, I thought this week we would have a little palate cleanser.
Yes.
Today, I'm going to tell you the story of how Senator Dianne Feinstein almost botched the investigation into serial killer Richard Ramirez, aka the Night Stalker.
Okay, I'm very excited about this one.
From the top, I just want to say this is not an episode about the Night Stalker case itself, though I wish it was, because that would be super fun to cover. But this is Crime in Congress, so we have to have a political angle if we're going to cover a case. Mm-hmm. The Night Stalker case is one that's heavily covered, but the story isn't often told from the San Francisco perspective, meaning even if you're really familiar with this case, I think you'll still walk away with a few interesting tidbits, including the involvement of Senator Dianne Feinstein.
Rest in peace.
I'm also shocked by how much is misreported about the Night Stalker, specifically related to his crimes in San Francisco. We'll get to why at the very end. But I dug through original sources, so I'm pretty confident in this info here. Without further ado, let's take a little trip back to 1985. She's Sarah.
She's Harley.
And we're gaveling in another session of Crime in Congress. In the 1980s, San Francisco was described as a haven for outcasts and misfits, an unofficial mecca for counterculture youth. Housing prices were still affordable at this time in San Fran's history, wild, meaning artists and musicians were able to afford to live in the city, and brought a lot of their culture with them. Punk music thrived, street art thrived, mohawks and skinny jeans were all the rage. The Reagan administration was in full swing, which meant high highs.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Iconic.
And low lows, like the HIV/AIDS crisis sweeping the nation, with San Francisco being right at the center of it. But on August 18th, 1985, a sunny 74-degree day, all eyes were on the Lakeside district of San Francisco, a neighborhood called Lake Merced, where a gruesome crime scene was being discovered. David Pan was stopping by his parents' house for his normal Sunday visit with mom and dad, 71-year-old Peter Pan and his wife, 64-year-old Barbara Pan. He must have known something was wrong when he had to force open the front door in order to gain entry into the home, but he wasn't in a full panic. Maybe they overslept or went somewhere that day and forgot to mention it. Or, worst case scenario, maybe someone fell or had a medical emergency and needed help.
Right. I mean, his mind didn't immediately go to horrible crime happened here, which I think my mind would immediately go to because
You're
it's
a
me.
Crimestituent.
Yeah. I think, yeah, normal people would probably be like, worst case scenario, I've fallen and I can't get up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, David was not a Crimestituent. His attitude would change once he managed to get inside of the home. Immediately, he was confronted with an unsettling sight. I don't know how far into the house David made it. I hope for his sake it wasn't too far. But it would have only taken a few steps for him to realize that he needed to call police. When the police arrived at the Pan home, which was on Eucalyptus Avenue near the San Francisco Zoo, they were greeted with the most horrific crime scene imaginable. This was like a scene out of a horror movie, and even the most seasoned investigators were disturbed by what they saw. Actually, I take that back. This wasn't a scene out of a horror movie. This was a crime scene that inspires horror movies. The first thing they must have noticed was that the place was ransacked. The person who entered this home had clearly wanted to completely destroy it.
Like a robbery gone wrong type of situation?
I'm sure that's what they were thinking at first, given the state of the home, because again, no one wants to assume the worst. The officers made their way through the living room, noticing semen on the carpet where the intruder had pleasured himself.
Ayo. Ew.
Yeah.
What? No.
It gets worse.
Oh, God. Okay.
They followed their noses to the kitchen. This is so gross. There was vomit all over the floor. The police surmised that the intruder had a feast with the contents of the Pan's fridge and then proceeded to vomit it all over the floor.
I'm sorry. Okay. I have so many things to say. A, DNA. B, disgusting. C, revolting. D, disgusting times 12. Okay.
Yeah. My thoughts exactly. I can't even think about it too hard or I'll start to gag. They're staring at what looks like the aftermath of a frat party in a quiet suburb. But all the investigators could think about was finding the Pans. It's clear that someone had come into the home with bad intentions, but how far did it take them? They raced upstairs to the bedroom, where they saw the couple of 16 years, Mr. and Mrs. Pan, covered in blood, laying motionless. Well, almost motionless. Mr. Pan was pronounced dead at the scene, but Mrs. Pan, though unconscious after suffering a gunshot wound to the head, still had a pulse and was rushed to San Francisco General Hospital to hopefully save her life. Once she was at the hospital, investigators were able to confirm that, unfortunately, Miss Pan had been raped before being shot and left for dead.
No, Mrs. Pan.
Yeah, this was a really brutal scene.
Wow.
From all accounts, the Pans were sweet, kind, and hardworking people. Reports will say that Peter Pan was born in Taiwan, but the website where I found the Pan's gravestone says that both Barbara and Peter were born in Shanghai Municipality, China. And in case you're wondering, Peter was fully aware of his name's reference to the fictional character. In an LA Times article that ran just days after Peter Pan's death, he was quoted as saying, "I can fly," when new acquaintances would reference Peter Pan the character.
So I love Peter Pan. I have to say a lot of things about Peter Pan. Peter Pan. First of all, Peter Pan was my first crush growing up.
Okay.
I love the Disney animated Disney classic, Peter Pan. But not only that, I also loved the musical production of Peter Pan. We had a video cassette tape of Kathy Rigby as Peter Pan that she did for a charity benefit. I think it was for the Children's Hospital or something like that. I wore that thing out. And recently, Peter Pan came to DC. And
really?
Uh-huh. And I also saw that production as well. I would sing for you. I won't.
If I can find some, like, not copyright Peter Pan music, I'm going to throw it in here for you. Just to give you that. But I had no idea I was unlocking such a deeply rooted passion of yours.
No, it is. And here's the thing, too. When I saw the production in DC, it was great. Don't get me wrong, it was great. Kathy Rigby is the best Peter Pan I've ever seen.
Really?
Hands down. Hands down. She embodies this, like, boyish, like, mischief, but, like, kind of innocence, but, like, so good. I also think it's very nostalgic for me as well. Definitely go watch it. I also, you know where you can watch it?
Where?
There's a streaming platform called Broadway HD.
Okay.
That I pay for.
Oh, gosh.
And I pay too much money for it, but I pay for it. And they have musicals galore, and one of them that they have on there is Kathy Rigby's Peter Pan. They also have Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat with oh my gosh, Johnny Osmond.
I'm gonna need to watch Longlegs and then a little Peter Pan, and then we'll jump into some other horror.
Yeah, Peter Pan, I would say, could be unsettling. You know,
there's a hook involved.
Yeah, just think about that.
Yeah, trigger warning.
Yeah. Maybe don't think of it as a palate cleanser. Maybe think of it as a really deep and touching and unsettling Broadway production.
We know that Taylor Swift is a Peter Pan fanatic as well.
I would sing again, but...
All right, check Broadway, check Taylor Swift.
Sorry, I had to say a lot of things about that. Okay, moving on.
I love it. Anyways, is Peter Pan, the character, still alive and well? This Peter Pan can't say the same. He moved to the United States to attend the Wharton School in Philadelphia.
Jeez.
And used that fancy pants degree to open an import-export business in Hong Kong. He and his wife Barbara immigrated to the United States, settling in California in 1969. They had 3 kids and at least 1 grandchild at the time of the crime. Seriously, I can't think of anything cuter than having a granddad named Peter Pan. Peter enjoyed gardening, which he described as a meditation, kept a photo of his 3-year-old granddaughter on his desk at work, and was described by a friend as a pacifist who was very proud to be an American.
Wow, this Peter Pan is, like, so much better than the OG Peter Pan.
He seems like such a sweetheart.
Yeah, seriously.
When you learn what happened to them, it becomes so clear that this was a senseless and brutal crime committed against people who did nothing to deserve it and were just minding their business at home on a Saturday night. With Mrs. Pan still fighting for her life in the hospital and Mr. Pan's body being taken away for an autopsy, the investigators were left to unravel a gnarly and unusual crime scene. On top of the violence and destruction I already described, scrawled across the wall, I presume the wall of the bedroom, but I couldn't actually confirm that, so it could have been the living room, in lipstick was a pentagram, which is a symbol of the devil, and the phrase Jack the Knife, which was another name for Jack the Ripper. Mm-hmm. In one source, I also read that the killer left a lipstick pentagram on Barbara's thigh.
So this is kind of like maybe a satanic ritual or something, or at least someone trying to pose or make it look like a satanic ritual?
That's where investigators' heads are, but they just have no idea what to make of this scene at first.
Is this also the time of satanic panic, or is that in the 90s?
I think that this was at the start of it, for sure.
Okay.
So they had a crazy scene, but they were able to kind of quickly develop a theory. Sometime between 10 p.m. and 10 a.m., the killer entered through an unlocked window, shot Mr. Pan in the head, sexually assaulted Mrs. Pan. It is possible that Mr. Pan was threatened or restrained, but alive when Miss Pan was assaulted. However, unlikely. And then Mrs. Pan, too, suffered a single gunshot wound to the head. Before going downstairs, he scribbled his pentagram and pathetic reference on the wall and his victim. The killer then went down to the living room where he pleasured himself, rummaged through the Pan's fridge in a frenzy, eating practically everything in sight, and then vomited it all over the floor, before sneaking back out the unlocked window or potentially door.
Dude, this guy sucks. Obviously, these are a lot of, like, horrendous things.
Mm-hmm.
He just sucks as a criminal, though, too.
Absolutely. Although, keep in mind, this is the 80s, so DNA evidence very, very in its infancy.
Yeah, you're right.
Even though there was a lot of DNA at the scene, science wasn't really able to put any of it to use. I'm sure they bagged it up for later in case, but
that's
just
such
bagging
a good
up
point.
Vomit?
That's such a good point.
No, okay.
For the listeners at home, sorry you're gonna hear me gag.
Yeah. The police initially suspected that this was an isolated act of violence, but they sent the information out as an all-points bulletin to other police departments just in case. This turned out to be the right move because murder scenes with pentagrams were not new in California at the time and gave investigators their first lead. You see, that year, 1985, Los Angeles had been experiencing a series of sexual assaults and murders from an unknown intruder who would enter people's homes at night. His MO was that he would enter through an unlocked door or window in the victim's home, often women and couples, where he would brutally attack the man, kill him. He was inconsistent in his methods, sometimes shooting, sometimes beating them to death, and even slitting throats. The woman would be sexually assaulted before suffering the same fate. He was known for doing weird things in people's homes, sounds familiar, and would often leave his trademark symbol behind at the scene, a pentagram.
So this is the Night Stalker, right?
That is exactly what investigators Gil Carrillo and Frank Salerno with the LAPD thought, who were running the Night Stalker investigation and immediately got their butts on a plane to San Francisco to tell them everything they knew. Today, we know the killer to be Richard Ramirez, but at the time of the Pan murder, he was known only in the press as the Night Stalker, or the Valley Intruder, as some media outlets were still calling him. The Pan's house was at least the 7th murder scene tied to the Night Stalker, and it was hardly a new scene for the special task force assembled to investigate the killings. However, this one stood out because it was in San Francisco, 400 miles away from the San Gabriel and San Fernando counties where the other murders occurred.
So Richard Ramirez is on the move, or it could be a copycat?
They're not ruling out the possibility of a copycat at this point. A Los Angeles Times article from August 1985 quotes Sergeant John Brassard of the Sheriff's Information Bureau as saying, "We can't say that it is the same individual who committed the San Francisco slaying, only that it is related. It would be poor investigation to rule out copycats or additional suspects." But investigators had very good reasons to think that this was in fact the Night Stalker and not a copycat, because the killer's calling card, the pentagram that was left at the scene, had not been made public. In fact, none of the pentagrams at any of the crime scenes were made public, meaning only the killer would have known about it.
Oh, so a copycat likely wouldn't have known to draw the pentagram. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Unfortunately, a police officer with knowledge of the Night Stalker crime, a lot of them in California were given information about what to look out for since they were hunting a serial killer, accidentally leaked to the press that there was a pentagram found at the Pan's house, and that calling card was revealed in the media just days or so after the Pan killing. So at the time of the crime and for the days following, the pentagram is a secret, but as that news leaked and stories about other pentagrams at the Los Angeles crime scenes were leaked, it became clear to the public that they were dealing with a serial killer, not a copycat. The man who had been terrorizing Los Angeles had made his way to San Francisco, and he was a Satanist. At this point, police were a ways off from identifying the killer, but there are several people who survived Night Stalker attacks. In addition to murders, he also committed rapes, kidnappings, and assaults, so a composite and rough description of the assailant was public knowledge. At the time, the police were looking for a gap-toothed, curly-headed man in his late 20s or early 30s. All of his surviving victims said that he smelled awful, described his breath as rancid, and said that he had these horrible, yellow-stained teeth that were bone-chillingly disgusting.
That's tough.
His teeth were so bad that his composite sketch was sent around to dentists to see if anyone would recognize him. He was the kind of guy who you would see walking down the road and immediately cross the street. Bad news bears all around.
That's so tough about his teeth and breath. Oh, it makes him even more disgusting.
The city was on high alert, with 70 extra officers assigned just to the Pan case, which was now a full task force, and patrols being increased citywide. The only thing they knew for certain about the Night Stalker was that he would strike again. But they had Frank and Gil assisting them, the LAPD detectives, who had an ace or two up their sleeves that would help steer the investigation in the right direction. While the pentagram and satanic references had leaked into the press, there were two other big pieces of evidence that the police managed to keep secret. The first involved ballistics. After testing, investigators were able to confirm that the pans were shot with a .25mm semi-automatic handgun, the same gun used in some of the LA killings.
Interesting, but not exactly, excuse my pun, a smoking gun. There had to have been like hundreds of people walking around with that same type of handgun in California?
For sure. Not a smoking gun, but it is a gun, so that's something. Though I did see in some of the Night Stalker killings that a .22 caliber handgun was used. It's possible that there was some misreporting, but I think he had access to both a .22 and a .25.
Okay.
I haven't told you about the strongest piece of evidence yet, though. The Night Stalker knew he was leaving pentagrams behind as a calling card, and he likely knew that ballistics would eventually reveal the type of gun he was using. But investigators knew something even the killer didn't, something that would tie him, and only him, directly to the crime. You see, at several of the crime scenes, the killer had left behind a very distinct shoe print, a men's size 11.5. The first shoe print was found on March 27th at the home of Vincent and Maxine Zazzara. The second shoe print was found near where a child was abducted in Montebello. This is important because it was the first time they were able to link the Night Stalker to crimes that weren't murders. The investigators had a hunch that he was responsible for the rapes and assaults and kidnappings in the area based off of survivors' descriptions, but this was the first proof they had that there was a connection. On July 5th, the shoe print was found at the home of survivor Whitney Bennett, a 16-year-old who the Night Stalker attacked with a tire iron. On July 7th, this is brutal, so prepare yourself. The police found the shoe print yet again. This time, it was imprinted on the face of 60-year-old Joyce Lucille Nelson in Monterey Park.
Jeez, that's horrific. Oh, God.
Killing someone is already just so awful, and then to stomp on them?
Yeah, imprinted?
Oh.
Wow.
Clearly, the killer didn't know he was leaving this calling card behind, or else he would have switched it up. Ramirez wanted credit for his crimes, which is why he left the pentagrams, but he didn't want to get caught.
Now, what's so special about these shoes that he was wearing? Why wasn't it not a common shoe print, or?
The shoe print was very distinct, and investigators were pretty quickly able to identify that it was made by a specific style of Avia sneaker. This was notable because Avia was not a popular brand at the time. The police then went to the shoe manufacturer to see what they could tell them about the shoe, and this proved to be a very wise decision on their part. The men's 11.5 Avia sneakers were only sold in black, giving police a better description of what their killer was wearing. And only 6 pairs of those sneakers were sold in the United States. 5 pairs were sold in Arizona, and 1 pair was sold in Los Angeles.
Whoa. Yeah, no, find the sneakers, find the killer.
Exactly. They didn't have DNA, but this is pretty dang close. It was the best lead they had connecting their killer to multiple crime scenes, and it was the only link between his murders and other violent crimes that weren't murders. So investigators knew that they had to keep this piece of evidence very close to the vest. Obviously, they wanted to catch him before he killed again, but if he was out in the world, police needed those shoes on his feet. To quote Frank Salerno, he could have left us a signed signature. For these reasons, the tidbit about the shoe, along with the caliber of gun used in the killings, were kept out of the press. Somehow reporters in LA did at one point learn about the Avia shoe print and threatened to publish it, but they were convinced not to after investigators explained that it would derail the entire investigation.
That's kind of the press.
Mm-hmm. Residents were already on edge after the Pan murder, rightfully so. But on Thursday, August 22nd, their worst fears were confirmed. Investigators were ready to announce publicly that the Pan murder was linked to the Valley Intruder or Night Stalker killings in Los Angeles. The Pans were attacked on Sunday, August 18th, but it took a few days for the police to connect with Los Angeles and get fully up to speed on the Night Stalker killings, plus they needed to compare shoe prints and ballistics. The next day, the police announced that they were able to connect another 7 murders to the Night Stalker, bringing the total to 14. Can you imagine learning that this man has just arrived in your neighborhood?
I'm putting myself in the same position and I'm like, okay, board up all the windows.
Yeah.
Put that thing. We have one of those things underneath, like one of those bars that you can put underneath the doorknob so people can't get in. We're locking it down. We are locking it down.
And he didn't really have a victim type.
Yeah.
He kind of just killed anyone.
Yeah.
He would eventually kind of steer towards older people, couples, and he had a lot of Asian victims, but everyone was fair game with this guy.
Listen, I might be going out and exercising my Second Amendment right.
There you go. Ooh. Another crazy fact is that the police didn't even publicly admit that there was a serial killer until August 8th. I'm guessing because of the shoe prints found in July. Meaning, for the public at least, this was an avalanche of information. They went from a string of murders to a serial killer who was traveling the state with 14 victims in under a month. At this press conference, the public also learned that the evidence connecting the crime scenes included ballistics, messages on the walls, and a distinct but unspecified third piece of evidence.
That's pretty vague.
Intentionally so. They didn't say the type or caliber of gun. They didn't say what the messages on the walls were, even though it had been leaked in the press. And they for sure didn't say anything about the shoe print. With the admission that there was a serial killer active in San Francisco, there was an unease and panic in the whole city. Residents wanted the killer behind bars, and they wanted him behind bars now. The police force was already doing everything they could to find this guy. But there was one person who felt the call to step up and lead her city through this crisis. Her name? Dianne Feinstein, mayor of the city of San Francisco.
All right, let's get into it.
Dianne Feinstein, born in 1933, was a San Francisconian through and through. She was native to the area and attended Stanford University, just 35 miles north of San Francisco, where she got her degree in poli-sci and history. After graduating in 1955, she came home to San Fran, where she interned at the Coro Foundation, an institute that gave young people experience in politics. This ignited a spark in Feinstein, who won a seat on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 1969. She served on the board for 9 years and was the first female president of the board. This is going to be its own episode at some point, so I won't dig too deep into it right now. But she was thrust into the spotlight in a rather traumatic and horrifying way. In 1978, Harvey Milk, the first openly gay man elected to public office in California, and Mayor George Mason were assassinated in City Hall. Feinstein actually heard the gunshots and was the one who called police. She also, trigger warning here, found Harvey Milk's body lying on the ground with 5 bullet holes.
Oh, wow. I had no idea about that.
Yeah, I didn't realize that this was her
Yeah.
entry into the national stage.
Wow. Huh.
As president of the board, this made Feinstein mayor. So not only did she just find her colleague dead, not only is she now responsible for an entire city, but she is also the first female mayor ever of San Francisco. Oh, and she was responsible for announcing the news to the press. That is a lot to process all at once.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to brush over this moment in history because it's very important and tragic, so stay tuned for a future episode where we can talk about it in more depth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also where we'll kind of get more into Feinstein's career, because that incident shaped the trajectory of her career far more than the one we're talking about today did.
Okay.
The public killing of a gay politician made national headlines, as did the new female mayor. She would serve as mayor from November 27th, 1978 to January 8th, 1988.
A decade, wow.
This is considered the start of Feinstein's political career, which would eventually take her to the U.S. Senate. But we're still in August 1985, where Mayor Feinstein was settled in as mayor and was a name people in the city knew and recognized. If there's ever a time where a mayor needs to step up and show that they can calmly lead their city through a crisis, it's right now when they're all fearing for their lives because a deranged murderer is on the loose.
Right. I mean, who are you going to call?
Dianne Feinstein!
Exactly.
And that is exactly what Officer Falzon did. He just called Taylor up and asked if the mayor's office would consider offering a $10,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the Night Stalker. The mayor's office wanted a little bit more information about what police knew before agreeing, so Feinstein called Chief of Police Cornelius Murphy to get some more info. He brought Feinstein up to date on the status of the investigation, what they knew, and whatever she learned on that call gave her the confidence she needed to announce a reward for information in the Night Stalker case. But the savvy politician she was, Feinstein wasn't going to do it without a little pomp. She was holding a press conference with a couple goals in mind. Announce the reward, show the police sketch of the Night Stalker so that it is on TV, and make sure that people understand how important it is that they come forward with any information. On August 23rd, 1985, the day after the public learned that the Pan murder was linked to the Night Stalker, Mayor Feinstein convened a press conference in what appears to be her office, which was packed full of reporters. With a stern face befitting of the situation, Feinstein sat down, held up a sketch of the suspect, and said the following. Your attention, please, for a brief statement. Everybody, please closely study this composite. He's someone that will go into a home at night and will kill. And it's a very serious situation. There's a $10,000 reward for any information which can lead to his arrest and conviction. Ballistics on the weapon that killed both Mr. and Mrs. Pan out on Eucalyptus over the weekend are the same ballistics on, I understand, more than a dozen murders committed in Southern California. Somewhere in the Bay Area, someone is renting a room, an apartment, or a home to this vicious killer. If you know who he is or have seen him, if you know anything, please contact the task force. We'll have him, and we'll have him soon. She then, and I don't have direct quotes from this part because they were quickly scrubbed, she revealed to the public the caliber of gun, the car the suspect was suspected to have been driving, and the exact brand of his Via shoe he wore during the crimes.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Oh, and at this point, Barbara Pan still alive.
I was literally about to say that too. I was like, so Barbara Pan died, but she didn't.
No, Barbara Pan's still alive.
Now, why would you reveal the one secret that the police wanted to keep close to the chest?
The brand of shoe.
One pair.
Yeah.
Sold in LA.
One pair. Obviously, this was not supposed to happen.
No.
And investigators were pissed.
I would be as well.
One officer said, quote, "It was devastating. I thought it was over with." Another told the San Francisco Chronicle it was a buffoon statement. It's our favorite word.
I know. We love buffoons.
Another said, "There goes the gun into the bay." In a Netflix documentary where he discussed the case, where I actually first learned about Dianne Feinstein's involvement, Gil Carrillo recalls saying, "Fuck it, Frank, let's get out of here. This is bullshit."
Yikes.
These seem like reasonable reactions to having a serial killer murder case blow up in your face just because a politician wanted a press conference when she definitely could have issued a statement or let the police announce the reward.
Now, was she told explicitly to keep the sneaker information private?
There's conflicting information on that, but the general consensus is likely no.
Mm.
What I think happened is that the police chief assumed he was talking off the record with Feinstein, and Feinstein assumed he wasn't sharing any privileged information with her. Still a major gaffe, but I want to make this point that in no way did Feinstein do this to intentionally derail the investigation. There are a lot of political outlets that have attempted to frame this as Feinstein helping the Night Stalker or as evidence of her incompetence, but I see an overeager, relatively new politician who didn't ask enough questions.
Right. And this is why we write our remarks and then we pass them around to say, hey, cool, we say all this. Is this all accurate information? This is called communication. This is called review.
Yes. And also, this is why, even when it's feels unnecessary, you always specify on or off the record.
Yeah.
Like, I'm very good friends with some of the reporters I work with, and sometimes it can be a little awkward for me to say, well, is this off the record? Because we're friends. And it feels weird, but you have to do it. And just like the very basics of political communications were not followed here.
No, clearly.
It had disastrous effects. I will mention this because you can see it on Google. There's a Fox News documentary where Vidal Herrera, who worked in the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office during the Night Stalker investigation, said, quote, they asked her specifically, please do not say anything about this case. And she went and did it anyway. She blurted out that there's a serial killer, and that's how she got her name on the map. But I don't put too much stock into this because A, he wasn't privy to the conversation, and B, he's wrong that the Night Stalker press conference put Feinstein on the map.
Right.
And the chief of police never said for certain that he did tell Feinstein not to say anything, and I think he would have if he were clear with her about it.
Yeah, 1,000% he would have been like, for the record, I told her not to say anything.
In the days following, the media would do a pretty good job of not revealing the important bits of information that Feinstein shared. Most of the reporting only says that she shared the caliber of gun, but doesn't get specific and doesn't mention the other pieces of evidence she revealed.
Once again, go off press.
Right?
Yeah.
Responsible.
Wow.
But it was carried live, so the damage had been done. And investigators had every reason to be concerned that Richard Ramirez was watching, because he had told a previous surviving victim, quote, I am the Night Stalker, a name the media had given him. So he's watching.
Yeah.
Immediately after the press conference, Frank and Gail, who are like in charge of all of this, went to the bar to drink their sorrows away and pick up the pieces of their shattered investigation. They'd been searching for this man for months. And in this moment, at least, it felt like all of that hard work went right out the window. In that same documentary, the officers recall Sheriff Sherman Block from LA County joining them for a drink and asking what he could do to help. Their response was, quote, stop politicians from getting involved in our case.
Jeez. I mean, I guess fair, but wow, yeah.
Yeah. The sheriff didn't stay for long, and about 30 minutes later, the detective's cell phone rings. It's Sheriff Block. Stop drinking, get something to eat, get back into the office in 45 minutes. In most situations, this is the worst phone call you could possibly get from your boss.
1,000%.
But when you're hunting a serial killer, now means now. Frank and Gail did as they were told and returned to the office, where Sheriff Block was holding a late-night emergency press conference. Good evening, he said. I want to thank all of you, first of all, for coming out at this late hour on such short notice. Because of the linkage between the events in our community, the murders and assaults, and the one in San Francisco, we felt it necessary to disseminate to all law enforcement in the state of California some very critical, sensitive information. It is unfortunate that some of these agencies around the state have released some of that information to the media. And I'm telling you that that information has significantly jeopardized the investigation that is underway. A week ago, we did not have a great deal to work on. But as of this moment, we have one heck of a lot less.
I'm interested that he had a late night press conference just to say, hey, by the way, Feinstein screwed over our investigation.
But then also didn't mention her.
Yeah.
It's, this statement is like where you finally see some comm savvy coming in, because he's like, all right, I don't want to spar with the mayor.
Yeah.
And it was the San Francisco police chief who leaked it, and LA was in charge of the investigation because that's where most of the crimes were. So he's saying, we gave information to other departments who gave it to the media and just kind of sidestepping the whole Feinstein part. But it was the same night.
Yeah.
Like,
interesting.
It was 1,000% a reference to Feinstein.
Oh, yeah.
But he didn't call her out by name, which I feel like would have happened if that mistake were made today.
Yeah.
Like I said, damage had been done, but it was encouraging for Gail and Frank that they had the sheriff on their side and knew that they didn't have to take Feinstein's screw up lying down.
Okay.
They had a killer to catch, a killer who hopefully hadn't been watching the local news live and wasn't aware that he was being tracked through his shoes. But unfortunately, Richard Ramirez was one step ahead of investigators, as he had been for months. The night of the press conference, he walked to the Golden Gate Bridge and dropped his shoes over the side, never to be recovered by police.
No.
This was a major, major, major screw up for Mayor Feinstein. The only real lead investigators had that was unique to their killer had gone cold.
Wow. I mean, I'm actually kind of surprised she was able to survive politically after that kind of screw up. But I guess, again, like, the sheriff didn't mention her by name. I don't know.
She also would have some luck on her side.
Okay.
First, the media did the moral thing instead of the headline grabby thing and did not reprint the information. And with no social media, it's not like the clip was making the rounds, meaning no fodder was created for attack ads in the future. Second, the big break in the Night Stalker investigation was only days away.
Okay.
On August 28th, a stolen 1976 orange Toyota station wagon, one of the cars that had been spotted near the scene of a previous crime, was spotted in Los Angeles. I think this is the car that Feinstein described, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
In which case it would have made sense that he abandoned it.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I said, it was abandoned, but it gave police an idea of where their killer went after San Francisco. The next day, investigators were able to pull fingerprints off of the Toyota, which linked the Night Stalker to 2 more murders, bringing his total now to 16. This fingerprint would lead investigators to identify their killer as Richard Ramirez. And on August 30th, 1985, 6 days after he murdered his final known victim, Richard Ramirez's name and photo were released to the public.
Wow. So Feinstein did get lucky with that.
She got really lucky. A manhunt was underway. On August 31st, 1985, Richard Ramirez, the most unwanted man in California, was in East Los Angeles and stopped by a liquor store. He leisurely picks up the newspaper, ready to see what terrible crimes he'd committed the days prior, when a familiar face peered up at him. His photo was on the front page of every newspaper in the city.
Nice.
Ramirez ran. Someone who saw him at the liquor store called in a tip to police, who chased him with all of the resources they had, including cars and helicopters. Ramirez didn't try to keep a low profile. Instead, he went into a local neighborhood and tried to steal a getaway car. He was attacked by another person while attempting this robbery.
Nice.
So he ran to a different car where the driver, Angie De La Torre, stood on business and fought back.
Okay, Angie.
Ramirez was able to get a cheap punch-in on her stomach and got her keys, but not before 85-year-old Jose ran to Angie's defense. In an interview with the Los Angeles Times, Jose recalled, "I ran to her, and he told me, 'Don't get closer or I'll shoot you.' I didn't see a gun, so I opened the door and pulled him out of the car."
Jose, I love this guy.
I know. Smart thinking, too, because he's probably like, if you had a gun, you would have used it on this woman.
Yeah.
But still brave.
Also 85. 85, he's like, no more. No more of this in my neighborhood.
After Jose pulled Ramirez out of the car, a crowd had formed and were hell-bent on keeping him down. Angie's husband brought barbecue utensils and smacked him in the head with it, which is such a husband-boyfriend thing to do.
I love that.
Somehow, Ramirez was able to temporarily escape this ragtag group of vigilantes, but they chased him down the street yelling, "El Matador, El Matador," which is Spanish for the killer, the killer. He was in a primarily Hispanic neighborhood. The crowd grew bigger and bigger, and eventually Ramirez was overtaken by an angry crowd that beat the shit out of him. Ramirez reportedly caved to the mob, saying in Spanish, "It's me, it's me, it's me. I'm lucky the cops caught me."
No, you're not, because the cops didn't get you. This crowd got you, babe.
Yeah, well,
and beat the shit out of you.
He is right, though, because that mob was going to kill him.
Yeah,
and the police stepped in.
right.
So in 1989, Ramirez was found guilty for 13 counts of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, 11 sexual assaults, 14 burglaries, and was sentenced to death by gas chamber. The sentence was only for the crimes he committed in Los Angeles County. Peter Pan was not one of the victims who saw justice in this ruling. His court date was set to begin on November 8th, 1989. And before you ask, yes, he was only going to face trial for the murder of Peter Pan because Barbara Pan survived the attack.
Yay!
Now, there's very little good news to be found here because she was disabled for the rest of her life and went through a violent, vicious attack that killed her husband. But she survived, and I think that's remarkable given the extent of her injuries.
Yeah, I mean, she was shot in the head.
I also don't know how much she remembers because she was unconscious, so hopefully it was very little.
Mm-hmm.
It's also crazy because a lot of places report, maybe because of the Feinstein press conference, that Barbara was killed by the Night Stalker, which is sad because she had a lot of years of life still ahead of her. According to her gravestone, which she shares with Peter, she died April 23rd, 2000 in California at age 78. The couple is buried in Cypress Lawn Memorial Park, Colma, San Mateo County, California, USA.
Well, I'm really glad they were able to be buried together.
No. Another fact that gets misreported in this case very, very often. In fact, I had to dig for hours through newspaper archives to even find the right answer. I have a Los Angeles Times subscription now. Gotta cancel that. But justice would never be served in the Pan case. In 1995, his San Francisco trial was stayed indefinitely. And I found the following quote in a 2008 writ of habeas corpus that was filed on behalf of Ramirez. Because petitioner was incompetent to stand trial, based upon this social history and mental health evidence developed by the lawyers at the San Francisco Police Department, his criminal trial proceedings in the San Francisco County Superior Court were stayed indefinitely in 95 and were never brought to trial. I find it interesting that he was found mentally incompetent, but I think there are a few factors at play. First, his mental health certainly declined after receiving the death penalty. I think that makes sense. But second, reports suggest that Ramirez was a really big burden at the San Francisco jail, being difficult and attracting hordes of attention. And since he was already sentenced to death, it seemed like the city just didn't want to deal with him anymore.
I see.
He was using a lot of time, a lot of resources. It was a big headache, and he was going to die anyway.
Right.
Because of this move, a lot of the details of the Pan case remain a mystery because there was no trial. And the city has kept a tight lid on the information, which has been ripe for some conspiracy of like, oh, well, maybe there was a screw up or it wasn't Ramirez and that's why they don't want the information out there. I don't think that's the case. Ramirez would never face the gas chamber for his horrific crimes either. He died while in prison in 2013 after battling B-cell lymphoma at the age of 53. All I have to say is good riddance.
I guess I don't know how the death penalty works and going through like the process and stuff, but 2013?
Lawyers can delay these sorts of things, and that's kind of what happened here. He unfortunately would live 13 years longer than Barbara, which feels unfair.
1000%.
Kind of pulling back a little bit, can you imagine if the car wasn't found in LA? This ended up being not that big of a scandal for Feinstein at the end, but she just got lucky. This easily could have been much, much worse for her.
Yeah, like imagine if the trail had just gone like immediately cold. You know,
more people were killed.
Yeah, I mean, she got lucky. She got very, very lucky. And I really want to know what those like behind the scenes conversations were like. How those first of all, if you're the police too, I wonder how you don't communicate to someone that, hey, by the way, you can say whatever you want in this press conference. Glad we can get, you know, his mugshot out or whatever. Not his mugshot, his description out, yada, yada, yada. Please, God, just don't say this one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. He is to blame too. This is not all on Feinstein. However, she's the one who leaked it. And I also think it's odd that the police weren't at this press conference. It was in the mayor's office, which kind of does give me this sort of sense that they probably weren't coordinating as much as they should have. I think there was a touch of ego at play of like wanting this to be like your moment in the press. Right. Which it's just unfortunate because this was not the time for that. But like I said, I mean, the Fox News documentary really makes it seem like Feinstein was out to sabotage and that this was intentional. And she had an amazing career, and this in no way defines her career. But it's a major screw up.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that she did it on purpose. I don't think it's that like extreme of a situation.
Yeah, there's no conspiracy.
Right.
But like as a comms person, I sweat thinking about it. Like nightmare. That's like your worst nightmare scenario.
Yeah.
I can't think of a worse press conference than letting a serial killer off the hook.
So just think about that next time you have a bad day.
Yes.
You did not help a serial killer get away with murder.
I think that's a good place to leave this.
I think so too.
So until next time, Sarah, can you gavel us out?
Absolutely.